Ralph Nader to our stage. You know, he needs not much introduction, but I want to say just a few things. Personally, he's been such a mentor because he wanted to make sure that Green America got the word out as far as they could about all of our works. And when I was a young green behind the ear, I'm green through and through, but when I was even younger, he used to tell me, now, Lisa, this is what you have to do to get the word out. And he was just, he is brilliant at that. And as you know, he's also a consumer advocate, an author, and a lawyer. He is a public citizen with more than 40 years at the forefront of progressive movements. He's been cited by The Atlantic as one of the 100 most influential figures in American history. He's launched 3 major presidential campaigns. He's founded more than 100 civic organizations. He's written bestsellers including The 17 Traditions, The Good Fight, and landmark Unsafe at Any Speed, one of the 100 most influential figures. Please welcome him to the Green Festival stage, Mr. Ralph Nader.
Thank you, Lisa. Always there, always initiating. Let's have a hand for her. All right, thank you all for coming. Sometimes I think, we should start a new group in this country called the Serious Society, because a lot of people with our views just take it a little way, but they don't round all the way from first base to home. So I'm going to start in reverse this time. Not just trying to give some impression of where things are, and how far we have to go, and all the solutions that are on the shelf, and not applied to the problems on the ground because of a broken democratic society under the heel of the corporate supremacists and their government servants. I want to start with what is required to turn it around. And this is a reflection not of some hypothetical wish list. It's a reflection of a lot of years asking myself that question. Every time we broke through with a victory, what did it take in terms of people, resources, media, smarts, timing, focus? What does it take? I mean, in the sports world, they ask that all the time, right? When they got a football team or baseball team, what does it take to break through? We don't often ask that question. We're too busy making brilliantly substantiated arguments for our cause. And we have so many good arguments, so much evidence about the institutional injustices right across the continuum, whether people are patients, whether they're workers, whether they're consumers, whether they're minority, whether they're voters, right across the board. Our side is very well documented. Books, articles, documentaries, the golden age of exposés. Some of it is even spilled over into the mass media. 60 Minutes, New York Times, Washington Post, whatever we may think of their lesser sides, they expose corrupt power at levels far more than we're able to use because our democracy is underdeveloped. And we are now an advanced third world country. We are advanced in military killing technology and science and engineering of sorts, although sometimes it seems that we're forgetting our past engineering successes and going into more and more trivial apps and computerized systems. But generally speaking, this country is populated by poor people. Over half the country is really poor. The Department of Labor defines it as if you have a family of 4, you're not poor if you make $24,000 a year or more before deductions. You see how they rig it? It's actually double that. If you don't have almost double that before deductions, you have a family of 4, you're poor. Especially since most people in that category don't have health insurance, they don't have paid sick leave, they don't have paid family leave. So we are an advanced third world country. And this is a stunning development that even with all the warts of U.S. history, we've never had 30 years when 30 million workers today are making less than workers made in 1968, adjusted for inflation. 30 million workers today are making between $7.25 and $10.50 an hour, often without any benefits. That's going backwards into the future. These are the people, by the way, who really work. You know, they're not paper pushers. They're not people who look at screens and engage in side text messaging. These are people who clean up after us, who produce and harvest our food, who take care of our ailing grandparents, who service us at counters all over the country. And they're making less than the same workers at Walmart made in 1968, 45 years ago. Walmart workers today, 1 million of them, are making less 45 years ago. By the way, the head of Walmart, in case you're concerned, Mike Duke, makes $11,000 an hour plus benefits, 8 hours a day. See, that's almost beyond our imagination. So let's break it down. He has 1 million workers who make between $7.25 and $10.50 an hour. You know what he makes a minute? $180 a minute. That's important to tell your friends and your circle. So let's start with, what does it take? If we had an analysis of the single most important established tool to turn this country around, we're talking about the mechanism. It's the U.S. Congress. The reviled U.S. Congress that now comes in at 10% approval, or maybe 12%. Maybe after next week it'll be 5%. The U.S. Congress is by far the most important branch of government. It's the one that appropriates money, that taxes, that it's supposed to declare war. The investigative arm is Congress. That's the oversight of the government. It gets great press, usually compared to the rest of us, when they have hearings. And there's only 535 of them. Now, you know who's made my point? 1,500 corporations. 1,500 corporations control, on most issues, what a majority of the members of Congress do. A majority. Now, do you think 1,500 corporations have demonstrations in city squares demanding what they want? You think they have rallies and marches? We, 1,500 corporations, Citigroup, Pfizer, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Archer Daniels Midland, Metropolitan Life. Have you ever seen a rally of these corporations? Have you ever seen public demonstrations of these corporations? No, because they know where the power is. They focus on state legislatures and Congress. They focus on those 535. And they do it by funding them, by offering them jobs when they leave the Congress, nice cushy jobs. They do it by getting Congress to agree to confirm their appointments to high positions in government. Who do you think runs the State Department, the Department of Defense, or Department of Interior and Department of Agribusiness and the Department of the Treasury, ex-corporate executives, little on-the-job training. They get inside a government, they got tens of thousands of lobbyists here, corporate occupied territory known as Washington, D.C. They got lobbyists for every member of Congress. There was a time when the drug industry actually had one lobbyist for every member of Congress full-time going up to Capitol Hill to get the drug benefit bill and to block any kind of single payer. So what do we learn from them? They've been fairly successful. Anybody here that doesn't have a political circle of friends, relatives, or co-workers that is under 10 people? Anybody here? Don't you have at least 10 people or more that you talk politics with and share your view? That's the beginning of a Congress watchdog club in the congressional district. Let's not think too grandiose. Let's just say, you know, I have a talking circle around me, and we have constant conversations about what's wrong and what can be made right. Let's give it a little edge. Let's put up a letterhead. Congress Watchdog Club, 16th District, Florida, 21st District, California, 4th District, Virginia. Let's put it up there. And let it be known that we're going to be watching Congress. Nothing against bird watchers. We're going to be Congress watchers. Would that we had 1/10 of the Congress watchers that we have bird watchers. Never mind their intensity. The reason why the country is in its pits can be traced in no small part to the abandonment of grabbing hold of Congress by the people back home, who will ask themselves the first seminal question: why are we giving so much of our power to 535 people, most of whom are for sale or rent, and most of whom turn our power against us? That's the seminal question. Here's what it takes, in my judgment, and I'll explain what will happen once this is reached. Every congressional district has, now I want you to tell yourself in your mind how many people, just in your mind, guess how many people every congressional district has. If anybody came within 50,000 of that actual number, I want you to raise your hand. It's about 660,000 people. How many people came within 50,000 of that? That's the first problem. See? Knowledge is power. And knowing what the right thing is to do doesn't mean you have the additional knowledge to mobilize for action. Every congressional district has a community college. Some have a community college and a four-year college. Some have a community college, four-year college, and a university. Every congressional district has progressive people. Don't buy this red state, blue state nonsense. People bleed everywhere, they get ripped off everywhere, and they know it. They get marginalized everywhere, they get excluded everywhere, they get underinsured everywhere, they get disrespected everywhere, and they know it. Don't buy into this clever polarization of the country. That's why we're gridlocked, that we got rednecks in one part and progressives in the other. And you all know that. Every congressional district has far more of what's needed. Become the power for majoritarian just positions in our country. So let's start de minimis. You start your own Congress watchdog clubs. Pretty soon in a congressional district, you might have 10 people like you with 10 friends or co-workers, and you connect up, internet age, nothing to it. Suddenly you have 100. You're not looking for new people, you already know them. 10 of you know 10 people. You say, well, what happens when we do that? Well, let me give you an example. If we ever reach a point where we have 1,000 people in every congressional district, that's less than 500,000 people out of 330 million men, women, and children. Less than 500,000. And if 1,000 people agree to devote at least 200 volunteer hours a year, average 4 hours a week, and agree to raise $200 a year each to set up full-time offices with full-time people coordinating you on issues you want to get through Congress or you want to block in Congress, here's what you're going to get, in my judgment. You're going to get what I listed in my 2008 presidential campaign website. Because one reason we had that campaign was to show that major improvements in our country, long overdue, many of them in Western Europe, major improvements in our country, supported by a majority of the people, are completely ignored in the presidential campaigns of the Republican Democratic Party. In other words, they're off the table. So I left my website open so that you can go to it. It's votenader.org, 2008. And here are the majoritarian positions that were not discussable off the table. Now let me tell you, if two major parties don't discuss anything, it's a pretty good bet they're not going to do it, right? Okay, here's what they are. Single-payer national health insurance. Full Medicare for all, everybody in, nobody out, free speech, free choice of doctor and hospital. Majoritarian support since forever, since Harry Truman. Majority support by doctors, majority support by nurses. Off the table. This is what we would get with 1,000 or so people organized in each congressional district. That will right off save tens of billions of dollars a year, millions of unnecessary operations, prescriptions, and procedures, which now are part of the military, part of the health industrial complex. The more they prescribe, the more you buy, the more profit they make, and it will save 800 American lives a week. A week. That's Harvard Medical School, peer-reviewed study, 2009. 800 Americans a week die because they can't afford health insurance to get diagnosed and treated in time. How many died on September 11th? 3,000. Every week, 800. Preventable. Completely preventable. Nobody dies in Canada, France, Japan, Luxembourg, Italy, Sweden, Holland because they don't have health insurance. They're insured from the moment they're born. Off the table. Obama doesn't discuss it. McCain doesn't discuss it. Romney doesn't discuss it. Off the table. 2, cutting the huge, bloated military budget and the empire it fosters. You want to talk about waste in the military? Talk about waste in the military? Just talk to the veterans. Just talk to the soldiers when they come back on leave. They'll tell you about waste. Staggering waste. Waste you couldn't believe could even be considered to be wasted. Brand new equipment being blown up now as we speak in Afghanistan. Why ship it back? Just blow it up. Don't give it to anybody. Equipment that can be used for non-military purposes. Huge military contract overruns, billions of dollars. The first $9 billion spent in Iraq is unaccountable. The entire military budget of the Pentagon, which is $800 billion or more a year, that's half of the government's entire budget, apart from Medicare and Medicaid. Half. Half of the budget of the U.S. government is unauditable. The Government Accounting Office has said that every year. They say they can't give us the data so we can audit them. Well, you can imagine the shenanigans that go on in an unauditable government, huh? Especially when whole cargo planes take off from the U.S. heading for Asia, full of $100 bills. Number 3, no to nuclear power, solar energy first. Majoritarian position. After Fukushima, even the insane advocates of nuclear power should be against nuclear power, but they're not because they're insane. They're making too much money out of a government-guaranteed industry. This is a socialized industry. This is an industry where Wall Street won't loan any money to the nuclear industry without a 100% loan guarantee to build a nuclear plant, which is why there hasn't been a nuclear plant built since 1973. When we came out against nuclear power in 1971, the industry says, it's too late. We got dozens of plants already. It's too late. We said, you wait and see. We had 2 mass training gatherings here in Washington. 1,000 people from all over the country to learn how to fight nuclear power, how to organize back home. There hasn't been a single nuclear power plant ordered, built, in operation since 1973. Talk about citizen power, coupled with Wall Street's decision that it's uneconomic. Warren Buffett says nuclear power is uneconomical. Before you even get to the radioactivity, and you get to the plutonium, and you get to the earthquake risk, and you get to Fukushima. Number 4, aggressive crackdown on corporate crime. Fun. You know anybody who's against that one? Other than the corporate criminals and their benefactors? We're operating in a corporate crime. Off the table, not discussed. We would get a very strong bill through Congress, basically setting up criteria and adequate budgets for the prosecution of corporate crime, the corporate crime corporations and their individual executive perpetrators. We would open up the debate process so that there are multiple candidates and multiple debates all the way down to the local level. We would adopt a carbon tax. A lot of right-wingers are for a carbon tax. The economic advisor to George W. Bush, Professor Harvard, just wrote an article for a carbon tax. Not on the table for the 2 parties. Majority support. Produces a lot of good revenue, too. Repeal the Taft-Hartley anti-union law. That's been so much off the table by the 2 parties, most people under 50 don't even know what it is. That is the most anti-union law in the Western world, and it passed in 1947. Congress was Republican, overrode Truman's veto. A major reason why we have so few people unionized in this country, Taft-Hartley. Adopt a Wall Street speculation tax. How about that one? That was not discussed by the two parties. You don't think that one has majority support? I mean, that's right up there with motherhood and apple pie. That could produce $300 billion and reduce some of the speculation and help rebuild our public works all over the country, keeping real jobs in communities that can't be exported to repressive regimes abroad. Work to end corporate personhood. Now, a lot of people haven't thought much about that, so it hasn't been polled. But let me tell you, the minute you explain to regular people all over the country that artificial entities like corporations have all the human rights that they have, plus the privileges and immunities that they'll never have, I don't think you have much trouble with getting majority support on that when you spell it out with examples. And there are plenty of examples you know about. We would get that one through. Defend, restore, and strengthen civil liberties in the civil justice system. You have coalitions of right, left that want to change the Patriot Act. Right, left people. You have right, left people in joint support of the principle that if there's an injurious wrongdoing, there's got to be a remedy. People cannot harm you wrongfully without you having a remedy in the court of law. Those are just some of the things we would get through. We'd have the beginnings of a different society. We could even add an empowerment agenda to begin shifting power away from the corporate state into the hands of people in their particular roles as workers, consumers, taxpayers, pension holders, and so forth. All this has been worked out. There have been studies, there have been agendas. There's no power in the congressional district. When I came here in the early 60s to make sure that the auto companies were going to be regulated for safety and pollution control, people told me that'll never happen, that the members of Congress are in the pockets of all these corporations. They don't even know how to spell the words consumer protection, much less regulating General Motors. Good heavens. This was a time when they had the phrase, what's good for General Motors is good for the United States. Well, there were enough people in the streets. You remember reading about that if you don't experience it. There were enough people in the streets fighting for civil rights, women's rights, against the war in Vietnam, for environmental causes, that the politicians began putting their finger to the wind. And the most unlikely corporate-controlled senators and representatives became raging consumer and environmental champions. One example, Senator Warren Magnuson from the state of Washington. He was very powerful, chairman of the House of the Senate Commerce Committee, and it was said that every industry owned them, especially the maritime industry and Boeing. Well, he pushed into law more consumer bills than any senator in American history. The Auto Safety Bill, Flammable Fabrics Bill, Product Safety Commission Bill, on and on. So what does it take? How do we get 1,000 people who are really serious to pre-agree on an agenda so there's very little bickering while it's being proposed? You come together because you agree on this multiple agenda. You don't come together to debate it. So there's unity. And it represents majoritarian support, what Abraham Lincoln called the public sentiment. How do we get that? There are two ways. One is to start small, like I suggested. Each of us, 10, 15, little letterhead, connect up with other 10, 15 letterheads, build it that way. Or if you want to take a shortcut, find the billionaire. Now, we can all stereotype billionaires and multi-billionaires. I decided not to stereotype them, so I had this book called Only the Super Rich Can Save Us. It's in quotes, by the way. And I hypothesized, what if out of all the super rich people in the United States, just 17 of them, led by an aroused Warren Buffett, decided to get together and top down, bottom up, turn the country around for many overdue redirections that I've just mentioned? How would they do it? How much money would they have to spend? How many community leaders would they have to discover all over the country? What kind of third party would they have to establish? How many hundreds of recruiters would they have to hire to constantly search for the hidden talent in our country? All kinds of talent, organizing talent, legal talent, technical talent, graphic arts talent, writing talent, motivating talent. It would take about $100 million to establish these Congress watchdog clubs. That is, if nothing occurred, as I said, where 1,000 people came and they raised $200 each, etc. It would take about $100 million to get the organizers. There are enough billionaires in this country, a tiny fraction of whom are enlightened. They've had an enlightened record. They're maybe in their 70s, 80s, 90s. They have a different view on life, and they're concerned about their descendants and posterity and their country. That's another way to do it. To get it going, we need to have certain resolutions. When you try to motivate someone to be effective and they turn you off, what do you do with that person? What do? Just forget their name? No, I would give them a little card. I would say, I know you don't want to join this movement for justice in America. I know you don't want to join this movement for peace. But I think you qualify for a certain society of apathetics. And you should join the Society of Apathetics. And all you got to do to become a member of the Society of Apathetics is to state the oath of the apathetic. And then you're in, and you don't have to do anything else. You can feel good about yourself. Here's the oath. As a member of the American Society of Apathetics, I solemnly swear and declare that I will endure any injustice, accept any abuse, absorb any disrespect, suffer any deprivation, concede any exclusion, inhale any toxics, and avoid any public responsibilities in order to defend my inalienable right to apathy, so help me, my descendants, and my country. That's all you have to do. So, okay. Now for the people who are serious, for the people who don't make excuses for themselves, for the people who have a higher significance of their impact on this world of ours, for the people who believe they count and they matter. The first step is not to practice what you preach. The first step is to preach what you practice. That's what a lot of these booths and exhibits are trying to demonstrate in their own way. All these booths and exhibits represent the beginning of a major sub-economy, now in the billions of dollars of consumer purchasing a year, a major sub-economy that could displace the multinational global economy, dollar by dollar, product by product, service by service. Every time you go to a credit union or a little community bank, or you join a renewable energy local group, or you connect with a farmer to consumer market, or you participate in a health clinic that emphasizes prevention, not just treatment, you are displacing the global corporate economy and weakening it. You're displacing the Bank of America. You're displacing Pfizer. You're displacing Texas. You're displacing ExxonMobil. You're displacing the agribusiness giants. You're recovering lost knowledge. Some of the most exciting things happening in this country today would incur the comment by our great-grandparents, so what else is new? You see that in farming. You see that in frugality, which is now called recycling. You see that in gardening. Imagine telling your great-grandparents, well, I was lucky today I bought organic food. So what is organic food? Okay, so we start practicing, we start preaching what we practice. All right, you say, okay, Ralph, what about you? Well, you asked the wrong question, because if you expect the embarrassed answer, I have never been, since the company started, I have never been in a McDonald's, never been in a Walmart, never been in a Starbucks. Somehow I get along. Now I discovered something the other day. It was very disturbing. There is something to voting with your consumer pocketbook, isn't there? I mean, where do these big companies get all their money? I mean, I know the Federal Reserve gives them a lot these days, euphemistically known as quantitative easing. Don't you like these guys, the way they rewrite the dictionary? It's called printing money. 80 billion a month that they give away virtually free to the banks. But mostly, corporations get their money from us. So every time you patronize community businesses, community economies, businesses that don't threaten to go to China if they don't get their way, you are weakening the giant corporations. So it was with some surprise that I've actually seen checks. This is not speculation. The Nation magazine's checks, the AFTRA pension fund of the union, SAG, checks, are written on JP Morgan Chase. And if that's not enough, the checkbook of the revered Democracy Now!, New York City, JP Morgan Chase. Now these three institutions, quite progressive, they live in a city where there are multiple branches of a union-owned bank of historic record, Amalgamated Bank. They have one here that's open for business since 1924, helped striking workers, now has a new vice president who says that once they reach a certain level of business, he's going to begin directing some of the profits towards social justice programs, right? See what I mean by not voting with your money? Nation magazine, Democracy Now!, and the AFTRA pension fund, including, I might say, a lot of unions who don't put their money in their own union bank. They put their money in anti-union giant bank conglomerates that are too big to fail and that collapse on the backs of working people, taxpayers. One of the arguments we need to use is to strip the opposition of their arguments. To pollute is not to be productive. Pollution control is economic productivity. It reduces damage to property, to life, and to health. It induces innovation. If you can't dump the stuff into your air, water, and soil, and these companies can't make your air, water, and soil and food their private sewers, they are going to react to the engineering innovations to internalize and pre-cycle and recycle their waste. You turn the word productivity against them. Never let them use that word when you're talking about environmental activity or safety activity. Unsafe products, unsafe drugs, medicines that kill people are not produced by productive firms. You don't let them ever say that. They're homicidal firms. Negligent, homicidal at least. The second is you take away their monopoly of the word violence and their adherence to the war on stateless terrorism, as if that's the main violence? Who are you fooling? How about this? 16,000 homicides a year last year, maybe less. How about this? Let's say that's preventable. How about this by comparison? 58,000 workplace-related deaths from disease and trauma every year. OSHA figures 58,000 compared to 16. Preventable. How about this? EPA figures 65,000 Americans die from air pollution. That's over 1,000 a week. That's more every month than 9/11. Horrible as that was. Preventable. I mentioned 800 a week, 45,000 a year because of lack of health insurance. Preventable. 100,000 a year from hospital-induced infections. That's not preventable? That's 2,000 a week. Centers for Disease Control, source information. 100,000 people a year die from medical malpractice errors, just in hospitals. That's not preventable? So you begin saying, what is your favorite course of justice? Whenever you can, attach the words anti-violent, attach the word productivity. Excuse me. And so, what it comes down to is the kind of language that obliterates a lot of the left-right schism. The left likes community self-reliance. That's what a lot of this is about. So does the right. They like community self-reliance. But if you throw red meat abstractions in front of both of them, they'll fight like crazy. I'm for free enterprise, you're for socialism, I'm for justice, you're for bureaucracy. But when you bring it down the abstraction ladder, where everybody lives, works, plays, raises their children, you can get a combination that's unstoppable. Unstoppable politically on Congress. That's what I mean when I mention that these agendas I just read off are majoritarian agendas. And this is, by the way, before the local conversations begin and before the propaganda is pushed back from the corporate supremacists and the plutocrats. Excuse me. So I put this book out, 17 Solutions, which is available out there. The Green Festival has them. Excuse me. Bold ideas for America's future. Almost all of them are majoritarian support. Many of them I mentioned here. The rest are how to get there. It's not just, here is what we need to go for a better world and better society. It's how do you get there? And that's some of the solutions. The solutions as to how to get there. By the way, you heard me mention graphic artists, remember? Here's what graphic artists can do. You know the old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words? Okay, so instead of simply trying to get people who are busy at the first interaction that you have with them in your neighborhood, and you try to explain how these corporations control the 535 members, can you see this? This is John Boehner, Speaker of the House, one of 11 children of a bartender, who is plastered with the corporate logos of the companies that own them. Sally Mae owns them. He always was for the student loan racket. You see, that's his jacket. That's his corporate jacket. There'll be some out there. Now, you could do this for every member of Congress. Can you imagine the impact when members of Congress go back home and they see this thing posted all over and they see it on the internet? And you can back up every one of those logos with publicly disclosed campaign contributions and congressional votes? Who said justice isn't fun? Who dares to say justice isn't fun? It's the ultimate gratification in life. There's no freedom and liberty without justice. There's no sense of significance without justice. And there's opportunities for justice for every talent ever developed that is peaceful and meaningful in this world. Let me end on this note. If I've had any success in communicating, I'll be hearing from you if you can start your 10-member letterhead and your Congress Watchdog Club. Every justice movement in history starts with one person, and then two, and then four, and then eight. If you don't believe it, read the history of the Civil Rights Movement, the Women's Suffrage Movement, the Labor Movement, the Consumer Movement. Read it all. It all starts with a few people who are not going to be deterred, intimidated, or have their lives trivialized with other preoccupations. The website is nader.org, or you can go to essential.org. Nader.org, essential.org. If you want to get my weekly column free electronically, just go to nader.org and sign up. You'll receive your hefty dose of infuriation and solution at the same time. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, isn't it amazing? We got one of the 100 most influential people in history right here. So I want to make you 3 invitations. If you would like to talk to Ralph Nader or ask any questions, he's going to be at the bookstore for as long as you're there. He'll be signing books and answering questions. So the bookstore is that way, about 3/4 of the way across the floor. That's invitation number 1. Invitation number 2 is if you've got your most comfortable seat, settle right in, because our next speaker is John Perkins, who's going to pick up exactly from where Ralph Nader was talking about how do we create this better future. So John Perkins, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, he's been there, he's seen it all, and he knows what the future needs to look like. So stay right there for them. And then, invitation number 3, with the price of admission, if you're not already a member of Green America and Global Exchange, you get to become one. So do stop at our booth and become a member of Green America. And if you want to take Ralph Nader up on breaking up with your mega bank, we have a booth, number 409, that you can get all the information you need to break up with Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, go